Ina Farrow.
This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation with Iain Dale.
Hello, a very good evening. It's 9:03 here on LBC. Well, it's time for the 6th of our Tory leadership interviews. If you've missed any of the others, they're all on my website or the LBC website or the LBC YouTube channel if you want to go back and watch them. Well, today we're in the company of Sajid Javid, who's the Home Secretary and Conservative MP for Bromsgrove. Welcome.
Good evening. Thank you very much for having me.
And I should explain, you can, of course, watch us on YouTube, on the LBC website, Facebook page or Twitter feed. Well, we've got the first ballot result, 23 votes. Was that disappointing for you?
Look, I'm pleased. I'm through to the next stage. And the history of these competitions, things can be quite fluid. They can be quite unpredictable. I think it's great to be through. And over the coming days and weeks, I've got to go ahead and make my case. And I think I've got a very good case to make.
You've got to get at least 32 votes to get through to the next round. What's going to be your pitch to the votes that were with Andrea Leadsom, Mark Harper and Esther McVeigh?
Well, actually, I won't just be pitching to those votes. And those, clearly you've mentioned three of my colleagues who sadly, aren't going forward. They're all good people and with lots of good supporters behind them. So, of course, those votes, in a sense, we all know will be freed up. And already, I think, I have a strong appeal, across the board to colleagues and across the spectrum in the party. But, of course, the way these things work, it's not just about those votes. There are colleagues that would have voted for other candidates that would have done better. Perhaps even some of them had more votes than me, but they will still be reassessing how they think this race is going to turn out. And so I think I have to rightly sort of pitch across the board and get as many votes as I can.
When you first came into Parliament and in the first few years, you were seen as quite an ultra-Thatcherite politician. You famously have, I think you and I share something in this, in that we have the same picture of Margaret Thatcher on a wall in our office. So I completely approve of that.
I don't see it here in the studio.
It's not. No. We couldn't possibly do that. However, since then, I think some people in the Conservative Party have seen you as a little bit of a flip-flopper, where they saw you as a firm Brexiteer, but you voted Remain. And now they see you as somebody who's trying to pivot back to that position. And there's a bit of distrust about where you actually come from in the party. And do you think that's been a problem for you?
No, actually, and I don't. I think in the time that I've been in Parliament, so since 2010, obviously I've held various roles, and I think the reality is, first of all, in a lot of the decisions you make, they're not always sort of entirely your own decisions. I'm not talking about the referendum. I'm happy to talk about that. But just generally, whether you're Home Secretary or Business Secretary, what it is, there's collective responsibility. These are government-wide decisions. And, I'm not giving anything away when sometimes, you have to make decisions or implement policies that you wouldn't quite necessarily have done it that way yourself if you had your choice. So that is part of the sort of compromise in politics.
But on the Brexit decision, where I was surprised when you came out for Remain, and I think a lot of people, and they've said it to me, they thought you did it because you were seen as very close to George Osborne particularly, and they thought that, you were looking to the future and it was a career decision rather than a sort of gut decision, and that had you maybe got your time again, you might not have made that decision.
No, it was my decision. I own that decision. I don't resile from it. I think at that time there were all of us, not just politicians, we all had to decide if we wanted to take part in that referendum, which way we were going to vote. And for me at the time, I talked about it quite openly. I wrote about it. I had to think carefully about that, and I made my decision. But the other decision I'd made alongside that was that whatever the result of the referendum, it's right first that we ask the British people, but we politicians have to accept their instructions and make it happen. And that's what's really frustrated me over the last 3 years. I was very happy with the outcome. I don't have a problem because it was a decision for the people. In fact, I said at the time that even if whatever the decision is, but even a leave decision, I would embrace it. I'd embrace the opportunities. And that's what I've been trying to do for 3 years. But it shouldn't have taken 3 years.
No,
we should have delivered by now.
It really shouldn't. But you were in the cabinet that hasn't delivered, and therefore you have to take part of the responsibility for that, do you not?
I take some of the responsibility, of course, because I have been in the cabinet since that decision was made. And that said, I think that everyone knows that these aren't every cabinet minister isn't entirely fully involved in all the decisions that went round.
No, but you do sit around the cabinet table every week, and you hear Theresa May go around the cabinet table asking people for their views on things without actually, as I understand it, very often giving her own, and then she goes away and does something that a lot of you disagree with, and then it happens time and time and time again. And surely some of you, and I know you have spoken I think I'm connected enough to know that you have spoken out in cabinet against a lot of things, but it's been to little effect, hasn't it?
Well, I wish it had more effect, to be honest, in that I've spoken out in cabinet many times, in meetings, outside of cabinet, more private meetings. Actually, when I say private, you'd hope cabinet was entirely private as well, but sadly that hasn't always been the case.
Everyone's denying leaking, but somebody must have done it.
So in lots of meetings, I've done that, and I wish I had been listened to more. But that's the way it is. But I think my job, if you are in the government, whether you're in the cabinet or not, is to sort of in private to speak freely about what you really think. But ultimately, if you're staying in the government, you're bound by collective responsibility, and that's the way it should be. So give
me something over the last 3 years on the Brexit side. Give me something that you would have done differently and you think would have had a material effect on how things might have gone.
Where do you want me to start? So you said give me something. I'll give you one thing. I think that 3 years ago, when the decision was made that as a government we should have prepared properly for no deal. And that's not because I want no deal. I still don't want no deal, but a responsible government has to prepare for all outcomes. But I think that had we done that more seriously, starting 3 years ago, right after the referendum result, we would not be in this position today.
And that's down to the Chancellor, isn't it?
No, it was a government decision, obviously led by the Prime Minister, but it was a government decision. For a couple of years, you talked to me about being Home Secretary, and I've been more involved in a way relatively as Home Secretary, but before that I was 2 years as Housing and Community Secretary. I wasn't really involved, especially in that department, because it didn't have much to do with EU and no deal preparation. But I think that that probably is, if you ask for one thing, I think that is the one thing that would have made a lot of difference, because by not properly preparing, the situation you put yourself in is that you were sitting there in negotiations with your European partners, with them really knowing that you had no option to walk away from the table. And anyone knows when you're in a negotiation, you've got to be able to walk away. And I've done many negotiations in my life. I've done lots of, in my previous career, multi-billion-dollar deals around the world. And I could never imagine myself closing any one of those deals satisfactorily if I didn't have the opportunity to walk away.
Well, I'm sure Brexit's going to come up a little bit later with some of the calls. Let's move on to what happened 2 years ago tomorrow at Grenfell Tower, because you were Secretary of State for Communities and Local Government at the time. Just take us back to that night when you learnt what had happened. What was your immediate reaction? What did you do?
Well, Iain, that for me is the most difficult experience I've had in life, most moving and most difficult. And when I really felt the responsibility of my office of government, with so many people relying on you. You asked me about the first moment I learnt, which was the sort of the early morning hours, and just sort of hearing, but more actually just seeing the pictures straight away on my smartphone. It was heartbreaking. It was, I'd say, terrifying.
Did you comprehend the scale of it at that point?
I think from when I saw the pictures, when I first received a call and someone said, "Look, there's been this terrible fire. It's awful. It's in central London." Until I saw the pictures of the tower, the whole tower virtually on fire, I think that's the moment when you really comprehend this is the awful. The people, because it happened. I knew it had happened during the night, so you were thinking people are sleeping, and the children. I kept thinking about children in the tower. People who couldn't come downstairs and things like that. And and then in that case, I went straight to the office, and but the immediate emergency there was obviously one to be rightly led by the firefighters, the emergency services, and I sort of felt, as a politician, I don't want to get in the way of the professionals doing their job right there and then in those in the first few hours. But I knew then, sadly, that it's going to be heartbreaking and for the loss of life we're about to see.
Do you look back and think maybe you should have intervened as Secretary of State a little bit earlier than you did? I remember.
In what way?
Well, I remember a couple of weeks after it, I wrote an article which you took great exception to, and I understand why. And I said that surely you should have been down there on day one in a sort of high-vis jacket actually organising things. Now, I'm told subsequently, and I think you said this to me at the time, well, actually, the council were assuring you that everything they had everything covered and they were doing everything that they could. And at that point, I guess you had no reason to disbelieve that, but they didn't have it covered, did they? Do you wish, in retrospect, you had done something a little bit different?
No, actually, and I think in retrospect, I don't think there's more that we could have done at the time, because in the first day, so you said you should have been down there the first day. The clear advice, actually, the request of the emergency services was don't. We don't need politicians down here, been bringing cameras and all sorts of other things, whatever. We need to be getting on their job. And I think, had I ignored that advice and gone anyway, it would have been a pretty irresponsible thing to do.
At what point did you work out that actually the authorities were not coping and that you had to intervene?
I think within 48 hours, because I went down the next day, and that's when I met local people, the helpers, the Survivors Council representatives, and I think within 48 hours we'd worked out, and actually within 72 hours we had set up an emergency response centre with the new chief executive, what we call the Gold Team, the Gold Command leader, with I think 70, 80 other people coming in from other local authorities, from government. Within the next day, it was about 200 people. So it all quickly came together. We headquartered out of Westminster Council's office because they could support that. So that all happened very quickly. And I look back and I think people moving as fast as they can. But you're right to pick up on the council as well. And I think it's right to say the council was overwhelmed, but also what council wouldn't be overwhelmed with a tragedy on that scale, because I think it's hard to think of councils being set up to do that. So I think people came together quickly, but the work continues to this day to help. There was a reception just a couple of days ago in Parliament that I attended with survivors, and again for me, meeting with some of the survivors that I hadn't seen some of them for a year since I've changed roles. And it brought back all the memories of all what had happened. And
did you get emotional at that point at all when you're talking to people who survived the fire or have lost loved ones? How do you personally react to that?
Yes, I did, and for meeting the survivors but also their family, the family of survivors, and there was I think. I don't remember the exact date, but it was about 3 or 4 weeks after the tragedy that the survivors, we'd set up a meeting with survivors' family, friends, but mostly survivors in one of the hotels. And I went along, and the office said, look, they want to meet with you for a couple of hours and quiz you. So I went along, and I ended up staying there for about 4 or 5 hours, and there was no limit on my time. I was happy to be there as long as I was needed. And the mood really changed when there was obviously a lot of emotion around, and I couldn't help it. I make no excuses for it. This is real life. And when I reached out to people and hugged them and met them, I did it because that's what was necessary.
Does that come natural to you? Because
yes.
Some people think that you're a little bit of a cold politician. You're not a naturally touchy, feely, huggy type politician.
Well, I hope they don't think that, but. That is.
But that's part. That is part of the modern armoury for a modern politician, isn't it? And that you are expected to emote in public.
But it's not about. To me, it's not about whether it's an armoury of the politician or not. It's what a sensitive human does, and I'd like to think that's what I am.
It's the sort of thing
It's
Tessa
not about
Jowell was
politics.
fantastic at, wasn't she? And not everybody can do what Tessa Jowell did, I suppose. Just one final thing on this. Your old department admitted this week that in the past 4 months, only 3 of the privately owned housing high-rises found to be wrapped in Grenfell-style cladding have been fixed. 146 are still vulnerable, and this is 2 years on. Something's still going wrong, isn't it?
Well, I think actually the James Brokenshire, who's the community secretary, and his team, they have done a lot of good work in this area, and I think it was a few weeks ago that he announced government funding in I don't remember the exact number, but hundreds of millions for private sector accommodation as well. And that's the right thing to do, and I know that he and the housing minister.
But it has been 2 years. That's the point.
But they're part of it. I think there are still some of these issues still coming up as fresh issues, and I think as long as the government is reacting in good time, as soon as the issues are coming up, as quick as they can, I think that's the right thing. But there's still lessons being learned. I mean, just a few weeks ago in Parliament, the new sort of building regulations were announced, which were all lessons learned from Grenfell, and I think there will be more as well.
Right, well, we're going to ask you a lot more questions in a moment, particularly on the future. What kind of vision does Sajid Javid have for this country with him as Prime Minister? 0345 6060 973. We'll come to your calls as well. It's 19 minutes past 9.
The Battle for PM. Follow it live on LBC.
LBC has been working with the Get Into Teaching campaign to look at how a career in teaching can shape lives beyond the classroom.
There is this fantastic moment when they're struggling, and then suddenly, poof, this light goes on and you can see, and they suddenly get it, whatever it was, and it's incredibly rewarding and it's incredibly fulfilling.
Go to lbc.co.uk for more information on a career in teaching, to hear the full discussion, and for a chance to win an iPad Air and Apple Watch with LBC.
Muscular pain can last all day and night.
Ouch!
And Eurofen's new pain relief can do the same. Introducing the UK's only clinically proven 24-hour ibuprofen patch. It delivers ibuprofen directly to the site of pain for all day and all night pain relief. Nurofen Joint and Muscular Pain Relief Medicated Plaster contains ibuprofen for short-term pain relief of muscle strains and sprains close to the joint of upper or lower limb. Always read the label.
Get Vodafone's double data deal this summer. We're giving away double data on all pay monthly smartphones. Yes, all pay monthly smartphones. Now a huge 30 gig for the price of 15, starting at only £30 a month. Double the selfie sharing, double the playlist pumping, and double the maps mapping. To get double data, go online or in-store today. The future's exciting. Ready? Vodafone. Terms and details at vodafone.co.uk/summer. Ends 9th of July.
Esso are delighted to announce that customers can now collect Nectar points with every fill. Ahoy there, Captain Rubberlegs. Pump number 5. Gentlemen in waders. Since you haven't caught any fish, how about catching a train? You've got enough Nectar points now and you've been angling for a reason to get away. You can even take a net. Sorry, I couldn't help myself.
Esso Nectar, helping fuel your everyday. Available at participating Esso sites. For more information, visit esso.co.uk.
At the Bank of Antandek, they're looking for a mascot.
We need an icon. Something that says high flying to all our mortgage customers.
Like a falcon or a stallion.
Or even better, a parrot. Check it out.
Trees and C's apply. Trees and C's apply.
Meanwhile, at Santander, they're concentrating on helping customers find ways to take years off their mortgage with their overpayment calculator. See what's possible at Santander.
All applications are subject to status and our lending criteria. Your home may be repossessed if you do not keep up repayments on your mortgage.
Radio, playlists and podcasts.
Missed your favourite show from LBC?
Download or stream to listen again.
Global Player. Download it from your App Store now.
With Conservative MPs jockeying for leadership of the party, the nation and Brexit, the task of setting a new course for life outside Europe will be in different hands from late July. Turn to The Telegraph for clarity. Subscribe now at telegraph.co.uk/subscriptions.
Iain Dale on LBC. Text 84850.
What... If you're making your speech on the steps of Downing Street on your first day in office, what's the one thing that you'd want the country to take away from it?
The one thing is that I would do everything as I can as Prime Minister to help heal some of the wounds in our country and bring people together.
And how would you do that?
I think a number of things need to happen. Top of the list, I do think we need to deliver on Brexit, and because that is such a fundamental test of the integrity of government, and I think people are looking for that. And then I think that you need set out a vision, what I would say like a positive vision for the future, and that has to touch so many things that for me would draw on my background, my experience both in and outside government, that would be set out to try and bring people together. And there's many different areas, so right from how you approach public services through to how you care for the most vulnerable, how you approach communities, for example, community integration as well, the housing crisis. I think that's got a big role to play in bringing people together, and making sure that you are showing that you are thinking about every part of the country, because I think sometimes there is understandably a sort of perception that we're too focused on the southeast, particularly London, when there are many other parts of the country to think about, and that also means things like transport connections, rebalancing the economy, infrastructure investment. So there's a lot to it. So I'd set out that kind of vision. Just on communities, I don't know if you were listening at the end of the last hour when we had a caller who said that he didn't think that you could win because Britain wouldn't vote for a Muslim. I heard that when I was outside your. Yeah. What did you make of that? Do you hear that a lot? Not a lot, but I have heard it before. Yes, it's not. It's not too surprising. How did? Well, you see, I think it is, and maybe I'm misjudging people, but I would like to think we are in a country now that doesn't think in that way, and that it would be very much the exception that somebody thinks in that way. I was actually quite surprised when I think it was called Louis came on, sort of quite an articulate young man, but I thought I was quite slightly disappointed that he said it. Well, look, first of all, I'd say I really think that we are the most successful multiracial democracy in the world. And, I've had the privilege to travel a lot and seen many other countries and many other democracies, and there's nothing like it. And, I'll give you an example. When I go to EU meetings and EU Council meetings, you've got ministers from around the world. It doesn't matter whether I'm the Home Office, the Home Secretary, the Business Secretary, or whatever. I've never, ever seen from any other European country anyone that has a ethnic minority minister from any other countries sitting around the table, and in Britain it's not just me. There are many, and I think that shows you how strong our democracy is. So why are you not surprised by those comments then? Because you said, have I heard them before? I have heard them before. Yeah. I mean, it's we as a country, I think, as we become a more modern country, we have become much more accepting of people, whatever their background. It's not just based on their race. It might be their gender, their sexuality, and I think it's great. And I think we have come a very, very long way. But there will always be some people that don't take that journey. And I talked yesterday when I did my leadership launch speech, and I talked quite openly about some of the prejudice I faced, and from all sorts of things. I talked of how when I wanted to marry my wife, who's white Christian, and people said, "Oh, you don't want to do that because you have half-caste children." Those were their words. They'd use words like that. And I said, as I said yesterday, my kids aren't half anything. They're fully British, and they're going to play a full role in modern Britain. But when you hear things like that, and does it happen often now? Your Home Secretary, you hold one of the great offices of state, and that ought to send out a message to people like Louis that it is possible for somebody, whatever their background, whatever their skin colour, whatever their faith, to come forward and take the opportunities that are given to them. But it must get slightly debilitating at times when you're constantly having to deal with this kind of thing, which if it was, Boris Johnson doesn't have to deal with this sort of thing. Well, it's other things, but yeah, it's not that constant. I mean, look, I think part of it is social media, and that if after this, my evening with you tonight, if I go and look at my social media, there'll be a whole bunch of racist comments. But that's social media. That's what people do. They can hide behind their sort of nicknames and things. No one really knows who they are, and they do that. And I guess to some extent, I have become a bit desensitized about it. But I also know it doesn't represent what Britain is. It's a tiny, tiny, tiny proportion of the population, so we shouldn't get carried away with it.
Do you think the Conservative Party has a real problem with Islamophobia? It's become a bit of an issue, hasn't it?
Yeah, I don't think the party does. I really don't. And that's not to say that there isn't a issue in society which can include members of political parties. I don't deny that. And we have seen a rise in certainly in reported hate crimes against the Muslim community and other communities. But if we talk about the Muslim community, obviously, completely unacceptable in every way. We have seen that. And we have seen incidents of that in the Conservative Party in terms of members of the party. Every single time that's happened, the party's taken tough action immediately without waiting, and that's what's necessary. So I don't think it's a party problem, but I do accept there is a problem in society where sadly it has grown, and we need to do more to tackle it.
And what's your own religious status now? You're brought up as a Muslim.
I'm not practicing, but I consider myself a Muslim. But I'm not, like in any religion where people are Muslims, Christians. You have different levels of how people might, practice or profess their religion.
How do you bring your children up?
Well, my wife's Christian, and actually, what we've tried is to teach our children about both faiths, and we decided long ago, actually before we had children, that when they grow older, it's a decision for them whether they want to have a faith at all, and if so, which one it is.
And what do they make of what you do?
Well, my job.
Yeah, what do they make? I mean, because you didn't have a normal job. I mean, their school friends probably have they have school friends whose parents would do what we would call
Well, it depends
jobs.
which age child you're talking about. If it's my 10-year-old, she thinks it's really cool. If it's my 20-year-old, she thinks it's hugely embarrassing.
In what way?
Well, just I think it's for anyone that any child I think often thinks that if their parents are sort of well known, they're in the newspapers and things like that. I think I can sometimes understand the embarrassment.
At your launch yesterday, you described Boris Johnson as yesterday's man, which, given he is leading the contest, was either it was something that Sir Humphrey might call a courageous thing to say in terms of career move.
I'm not. When it comes to my career, I'm just interested in doing the right thing, and what I think the right thing is to go out there, make my case, and see if that resonates and allows me to become the leader of the Conservative Party. And that's what I'm thinking of. But when I made that comment yesterday, what I'm actually trying to do is contrast with the future and the next generation.
But why is he any more yesterday's man than you?
Well, because I think that when you look at Boris Johnson's been around in British politics for a long time, a lot longer than I have, right? And so I think that when we're looking ahead,
he's only a couple of years older than you, though. How old are you?
I'm not talking about age. I'm talking about time in politics.
I think he was elected in 2001, wasn't he? So he's been
but then
it wasn't for 9 more years. But
that's almost twice as long as I have. So. I said. But
it I don't know whether you planned to say it or whether it just was something that occurred to you. But I remember watching it because I thought it was actually a really impressive campaign launch. And I remember I was with someone and I just said, wow, that's pretty strong stuff.
I was just trying to contrast with another statement I made, but as a contrast about what I think we need is tomorrow's leader, but today. I think we, as a Conservative Party, we need to look ahead. We need to reconnect with so many voters, and if we step back a bit and think that in the last quarter of a century, as the Conservative Party, we've only won one majority. We've only won one election, and that was in 2015, and that was only just, and it only lasted 2 years. And the lesson learned for the party, I think, is that you need to have broad appeal across the country, rural and urban.
But people see him as an election winner. Do you think they see you in the same way?
Yes, I do, and I think if you look at all the polls that have been done that look at who can appeal broadly across the country, yes, and that's what that proves.
But there was a poll from Comrades the other day that showed that Tories would win 140-seat landslide majority with Boris as leader. With you as leader, it would be a minority government.
There were polls that said that Theresa May would win 200-seat majority. What happened next?
Oh, do you really want to revisit that?
There you go. There's the answer to your question.
Right, we're going to come to your calls now. 0345 6060 973. Sajid Javid, the Home Secretary, with me until 10 o'clock. You're listening to LBC. I'm Iain Dale. It's 9:32. Serena Farrow has the news headlines.
Boris Johnson has a firm lead after the first ballot to decide who's the next Conservative Party leader. He's won the support of 114 MPs, 71 more than the next rival Jeremy Hunt. Failing to make the threshold though, so now out of the race are Andrea Leadsom, Esther McVeigh and Mark Harper. Keep listening to LBC as Iain is now talking to another candidate, the Home Secretary Sajid Javid. A man's been arrested after a woman with her toddler was stabbed in the leg in North London. She was with a pushchair in Islington at the time when the attack happened last Friday. And the US Secretary of State Mike Pompeo's just been saying that Iran's understood to be behind the attacks on 2 tankers near the Persian Gulf. The government here says it's ready to assist in any rescue effort. LBC, where the rain in the north and west of England, with more showers working their way into Wales and the south overnight. Clearer across Scotland and Northern Ireland, though, with a low of 3 degrees.
This is LBC. Sheila Fogarty, Monday to Friday from 1 p.m.
I think the opposite, Colin. I think it will mobilise both sides enormously.
Well, I don't think.
Will you vote?
I don't know. It depends on how you.
I can't imagine why you wouldn't if you're this passionate about your position.
I know what's going to happen. There'll be 3 questions, and they'll lower the voting age to 16.
What if there are 2 questions and it's the same age of voting? Will you vote? I can't imagine.
I already voted.
Sheila Fogarty.
With Blink Home security cameras, helping give your family peace of mind.
LBC.
You can complain free to your lender or the Financial Ombudsman about missold PPI. Alternatively, if you haven't got the time or the inclination, then just get the claims guys to manage the claims process for you. With the August 29th deadline approaching, time's at a premium anyway. So if you can't find your paperwork or you're not even sure you have PPI, it's definitely time to make a decision and start your PPI claim before it's too late. Text ANSWER to 66777. Text ANSWER to 66777 now.
The Claims Guys.
Managed to fill those jobs yet?
Oh, I'm struggling.
You know Mark in HR? He was telling me about Hiring Hub. It connects you to loads of vetted specialist recruitment agencies, so you can widen your candidate search quickly, without any hassle.
Really?
Yeah. You post a job, and recruitment agencies you select send you their best candidates.
Want to fill professional jobs faster? Search Hiring Hub and post your job today.
Mark's nice, isn't he?
Really?
Get Vodafone's double data deal this summer. We're giving away double data on all pay monthly smartphones. Yes, all pay monthly smartphones. Now a huge 30 gig for the price of 15, starting at only £30 a month. Double the selfie sharing, double the playlist pumping, and double the maps mapping. To get double data, go online or in-store today. The future's exciting. Ready? Vodafone. Terms and details at vodafone.co.uk/summer. Ends 9th of July.
Paul bumped his knee against the kitchen door. Exclamation mark, he yelled, at which point his wife burst in and bumped the door against his knee again. Ampersand, asterisk, yelled Paul. Swearing, a bad habit, but it can help us tolerate pain until we can find something longer lasting, like new Nurofen joint and muscular medicated patches for clinically proven 24-hour pain relief. Nurofen joint and muscular pain relief medicated plasters contain ibuprofen for pain relief. Always read the label.
Does it matter to you how your money's invested? Think about it. You've got your own values, but do the people who invest your money share them? With a Wealthify stocks and shares ISA, you can put your money into an ethical plan. Just tell us how you want to invest. Are you cautious, adventurous, or somewhere in between? And start your Wealthify ethical ISA today. Easy. For more information, download the app or visit wealthify.com. With investing, capital is at risk and you could get back less than you put in.
Iain Dale on LBC.
9:36. Sajid Javid, the Home Secretary, is with me to take your calls. You can watch us on YouTube, on the LBC website at lbc.co.uk, the Facebook page or Twitter feed. Jack's a first-time caller in Hendon. Jack, what would you like to ask?
Good evening, Iain. How are you?
Very well.
Also, good evening to you, Mr. Javid.
Good evening.
I've got a quick question from the Home Secretary. I'm a police officer, and I just would like to know that, obviously, as you said, you're going to recruit 20,000 more police officers once you become Prime Minister. How would you ensure that you will get the extra 20,000 police officers with the currently Met struggling to recruit more police officers? With the obviously salary is not great for the new officers. So if you could have an explanation for that, that would be great.
Yeah, look, thank you very much, Jack, and thank you very much for your service. In terms of recruitment, I mean, first of all, the reason I've said that is, and I'm speaking as a candidate for the leadership, that I have certainly come to the conclusion that police officers' numbers need to be restored, and that's partly because I think when you've seen the rise in all types of crime, but especially serious violence and more complex crimes like cybercrime, and you'll obviously be familiar with just how much police sort of man hours that takes. And that's why I've come up with the 20,000 number, and I think it is affordable. And your question was...
How much would it cost?
It would cost just over £900 million once you've got to the 20,000. But also to get there, the advice I've received is that it will be roughly a third each year, so about 7,000-ish each year.
And you're sure you could recruit them? Because Jack's saying that there's problems with recruitment now.
Yes, because and Jack's right. Sort of, it depends in which part of the country actually you're thinking of. But Jack's, there will be some parts of the country where it's harder, and that needs to be reflected in your calculation of the cost of salaries.
If you add another 20,000 on, you're basically back to where we were in 2010.
Basically.
So that's an admission that the last 9 years have been a complete failure in terms of policing policy.
No, it's not, because what we've also seen in the last 9 years is a dramatic increase in the most complex crimes, an increase in demand. And I think I can certainly see that how sort of back in 2010, 2011, some of the decisions could have been made in terms of fewer officers. But I think what wasn't thought through or projected, and it is hard to project sort of future crime patterns, is the huge increase in the more complex crimes. So if I give you another example, that the government has rightly also cracked down on modern slavery. And that's a big government initiative, rightly actually led by Theresa May. There's been government encouragement of especially women to come forward and to report historic sexual offences, and those are quite complex crimes. So a lot of this is a crime that's rising because government is actually encouraging people to come forward, I think we need to meet that demand.
I've got three graphs here with police numbers going down by 20,000, and then there's the rise in violent crime. In 2010, 611,000 violent crimes. 2018, 1,100,000. Total recorded crime, 2010, 4.3 million. 2018, 5.5 million. So it clearly was a mistake to reduce police numbers.
What I'd say is I think it would to sort of, you're taking one figure, which is a fall in police numbers, and looking at a rise somewhere else, and just because one's a fall and one's a rise doesn't mean to say
it's fairly logical to draw a conclusion that they are linked, isn't it?
I would say you've mentioned serious violence, and you're right to raise that. This is a major concern of mine, and where a lot of effort has gone into trying to address that. Part of the answer to that are the changes in drug markets. And if you ask most of the experts in this field, they say the biggest driver of serious violence, not just here in Britain but abroad, has been the massive collapse in the price of Class A drugs. Lots of gangs are trying to fight to keep their market share, and you can see how that spills over to violence on our streets, and that's got nothing to do with police numbers.
Right. We've got lots of other subjects we want to cover. We could probably spend the rest of the programme talking about policing. Jack, thank you very much. Let's go to Alex in Watford. Alex, what would you like to ask?
Good evening, gentlemen.
Hi.
7 members of Parliament have declared their use of drugs who are or were running for the top job. A comedian makes a statement which she believes to be funny and is being investigated by police. Can you explain to me why the 7 members of Parliament weren't investigated by the police?
So you're drawing the comparison with Joe Brand there, who made a joke about battery acid, which we've talked a lot about on LBC over the last 24 hours. It's a fair point, isn't it, that members of Parliament seem to say, oh yeah, I've taken drugs, and then there's no consequence.
Well, first of all, I think that we're members of Parliament, if they're standing to, certainly in this case, not just be leader of the party, but to be Prime Minister, I think it's right they're open and transparent about their backgrounds, certainly when they're asked the questions. Alex's question, understandably, is about whether the police, why aren't they investigating this when they investigate other things? And the answer, I mean, partly it is whenever the police have an investigation, they have to decide for themselves. It has to be independent. I can't tell them, and I shouldn't have a right to tell them as a minister that they have to believe it's in the public interest. And I don't know the exact details of I mean, I've heard about Joe Brand and what was said, but I don't know the exact details and circumstance. And nor do I know the details of what the exact details of what the members of Parliament have said. But in each case, it is a responsibility of the police, and if they have to consult with others to determine whether it's in the public interest.
Let's draw another comparison. You were a Treasury Minister once.
Yep.
You're familiar with the loan charge. I imagine you've probably got constituents who've written to you about it. Where HMRC are going back 20 years trying to claim back tax for, they say, tax which is owable. And yet you have a cabinet minister, a contestant in this leadership election, admitting to taking Class A drugs. And as far as I know, nobody in the police has thought, let's have a word with Mr. Gove then.
Well, I think, as far as you know, as far as I know too, I mean, but that doesn't, I having been Home Secretary now for a year, you do, a lot of information isn't always in the public domain, so these are independent decisions for the police.
People think it's one rule for them and one rule for the rest of us. That's the problem, isn't it?
I can understand that. I can, from what Alex has said, I do understand that. And I think the sort of the right way to deal with this is to make sure, whether it's police or other law enforcement authorities, that they are doing their job to determine whether a prosecution is in the public interest, but they treat everyone, doesn't matter if they're a member of Parliament or or anyone, that they treat them in exactly the same way.
Alex, quick retort.
Clear as mud, sir. Surely the members of Parliament have broken the law.
Well, it would be wrong for me to say whether they have or not, because it's inappropriate.
If you admit to taking Class A drugs, you've by definition broken the law. You've admitted your guilt. So should there not be consequences from that?
It's not appropriate for me to comment.
Okay. Let's go to Spencer in Crawley. Hello, Spencer.
Good evening.
Hi.
Good evening.
Sajid, I have one question for you. Win or lose, which of May's red lines will you look to drop to get a deal through Parliament?
Well, it depends. I mean, if you're talking about red lines in terms of staying outside the customs union, staying outside the single market, no second referendum. So I mentioned, I don't know whether those are the exact ones you've got in mind, but those are three that I think are sort of important principles, and I would not look to drop any of them. And that's partly because I don't think you have to. I've set out what my plan would be. I would start with the only thing that's got through Parliament, and that is the withdrawal agreement with changes to the backstop. And if I can get that done, then I don't have to drop any of the so-called red lines.
Spencer?
Not too impressed by that answer. I think her biggest mistake was immigration being the hard red line. And that has stopped us being able to...
You mean freedom of movement?
Freedom of movement, because that has stopped us being able to go for EFTA membership and being part of the EEA via the EFTA pillar, which protects our trade.
And you're not attracted by any of these EEA, EFTA, Norway Plus
No, not at all. I think that's Brexit in name only, I'm afraid. I think legally you can say we've left the EU, but if you're tied up to all the same rules, I mean, that's what EEA and the EFTA pillar would be.
But if you voted Remain, I would have thought you might be attracted by one.
No, I think if you're going to leave, you need to leave properly. What's the point? In fact, you're worse off doing the EEA and the EFTA pillar because you'll have no say in the rules. You'll be a complete rule taker, and I think that's a complete nonsense for the fifth largest economy in the world.
You signed up for that when you agreed the Chequers Agreement, didn't you? I mean, I know it's collective responsibility, but you did sign up for that.
No, I don't think well, I mean, first of all, I've got reservations about the Chequers Agreement, but just to take you directly on that point, the Chequers Agreement is not EEA and EFTA. It's not that at all. It doesn't include freedom of movement, for example.
But it does involve rule taking.
It involves a level of rule taking, but you asked me about EEA and EFTA, and that is a whole new thing. That is every rule in every sphere, including
but if
immigration.
you say, well, you need to leave completely, but you've actually admitted now that you would agree to some degree of rule taking.
Yeah,
There's an
so
inconsistency there.
No, I don't think there is. I think you leave completely, and you become a rule maker. But just like other countries that are not in the EU, such as take the United States and Canada. Take Canada. Canada's got a free trade agreement with the EU. There are some areas where the EU and Canada have agreed to share rules. And where they can do that, Canada as a separate sovereign state can choose to do that, but it doesn't make it a complete rule taker. It still has its sovereignty and independence.
We will have more questions to the Home Secretary in just a moment. It's 9:47.
Coming up at 10 on LBC, Tom Swarbrick.
Boris Johnson is streets ahead in the race to be Prime Minister. No one can get near him, it seems. Who is the best person to take him on? Or should he just be crowned now?
Tom Swarbrick on LBC.
Is your money working as hard as you do? Think about it. While you're grafting away, is your money working too? No? Then it's time to Wealthify. Wealthify is the smart, easy way to start investing. Just say how you want to invest. Cautious, adventurous, somewhere in between? And let Wealthify do the rest. Then keep track of your money on the app. Easy. Isn't it time for you to Wealthify? Download the app or visit wealthify.com. With investing, capital is at risk and you could get back less than you put in.
With Conservative MPs jockeying for leadership of the party, the nation and Brexit, the task of setting a new course for life outside Europe will be in different hands from late July. Turn to The Telegraph for clarity. Subscribe now at telegraph.co.uk/subscriptions.
You can get some pretty good deals for £1, like a scratch card, and you could win a fortune. But you probably won't. You'll just end up with a colourful piece of card and silver scratchings all over your floor. For a better deal, head to Costa Coffee and get some delicious toast for just £1 when you buy any Medio or Massimo hot drink or expertly handcrafted flat white before 11 a.m. The Coffee Plus menu from Costa Coffee. Visit costa.co.uk for full terms and participating stores.
Get Vodafone's double data deal this summer. We're giving away double data on all pay monthly smartphones. Yes, all pay monthly smartphones. Now a huge 30 gig for the price of 15, starting at only £30 a month. Double the selfie sharing, double the playlist pumping, and double the maps mapping. To get double data, go online or in-store today. The future's exciting. Ready? Vodafone. Terms and details at vodafone.co.uk/summer. Ends 9th of July.
Have you ever bought an investment sold by Barclays, Halifax, Lloyds, Santander or any other bank or financial advisor? Investments like stocks and shares ISAs, investment bonds and certain types of pension can be risky. If you lost money with one of these investments, you could be owed thousands of pounds in compensation. Even if you no longer have the investment or the paperwork, here at Goodwin Barrett we can still help. To start your free assessment with Goodwin Barrett, text SOLD to 66777. That's SOLD to 66777.
Do your teeth stop you from smiling and eating? Do you hate the thought of false teeth? Talk to TDC about Smile in a Day dental implants. TDC Smile in a Day dental implants look and work just like real teeth, so you can eat what you want and smile when you want.
I just wish I'd gone to TDC years ago.
Let TDC restore your teeth and your smile. Book your free consultation. Visit smileinaday.co.uk.
Iain Dale on LBC. Call 0345 6060 973.
10 to 10. Sajid Javid is with us taking your calls. Abdul is in Edmonton. Abdul, what would you like to ask?
Hi, Ian.
Hi.
My question is, was Sajid Javid left out of the Trump state banquet dinner because he's a Muslim? Because he was the only sort of ethnic person who was left out of that.
Let's just put this into a bit of context. Sajid, you said on the radio this morning that you hadn't been invited to the state banquet, even though you are a holder of one of the great offices of state. Since then, Jackie Smith has tweeted that as Home Secretary, she went to every single banquet, and the explanation given to you was that, well, the Home Secretary isn't always invited to these things, which turns out, it seems, not to be true. You seem quite angry about this, understandably so.
Hi, Abdul. I've said, and I'm happy to say it again, is that I wasn't invited, and I don't know why I wasn't invited. And Iain, on what you said about, is it the case? I heard what you said about Jackie Smith, is that she went to every state dinner. I've been told that's not always the case, and that's the explanation I've been given. So I don't think I've got anything more to add to it.
But it's not right, is it? Because it was either because somebody, whether it was on the British side or the American side, thought it wasn't appropriate to invite you to that. Now you have been critical of Donald Trump over the years, it has to be said. So maybe that was the reason, but you'd presumably like to know what the reason was.
I would like to know what the reason is. I don't know what it is at this point in time. I have asked, and hopefully I'll get an answer. But I would be interested to know. Yes.
But Abdul, you think it is because Sajid is a Muslim or his skin colour or what?
Absolutely. Number one, skin colour. Number two, because of the fact that he identifies as a Muslim. For me, there's no shadow of a doubt. It's those reasons.
Do you think that's entirely possible?
Actually, Abdul, I don't think it's that. I don't, and also I don't think the Prime Minister would have anything to do with this decision. I'm not even sure it would have even got to her. So I don't think she's
probably
involved.
Should have, though, shouldn't it?
Well, I don't think she's involved in any way. I want to be clear about that. And so I don't think it's that. I just I have a feeling it is not. And if I did think it was, I'd say I've got no reason to not say that. But I think there is some reason somewhere, and I just don't know what it is.
Okay, Abdul, thank you. Jeff is in Harrow. Jeff, what would you like to ask?
Home Secretary, good evening.
Good evening.
This is a question about trust. One of the reasons people will be supporting you is because of the contrast between your level-headedness, responsibility compared to some other candidates. But how can we trust you? How can we trust that you'll be a responsible, statesman-like Premier who does things, as you say, the right thing, when months ago you denied a British citizen their citizenship in flagrant disregard of international law? If you're willing to break the law when it suits you and when there's no compelling reason why, how can we trust you to govern and negotiate in good faith?
So he's referring to the Shamima Begum case.
Yeah. So, Jeff, thank you, and thanks for the question. You'll understand, Jeff, I can't talk about a particular case, especially where there may or may not be legal action, but I'm very happy to, I think, still properly answer your question. You said, how can people trust you? And you suggested that somehow that I've broken the law. I mean, first thing to say is that ministers cannot break the law. They are, it's not surprising. I mean, no one is allowed to break the law, and that includes ministers. But with ministers, you're not sort of someone that can just sit there and decide to do whatever you want without any consequences. The Home Office has thousands of civil servants, hundreds of lawyers, and so does the government more broadly. And ministers cannot break the law. Now, on that kind of particular decision, I just ask you to think about this. My number one responsibility is to protect the public. That's my number one responsibility. And there are lots of bad people out there. And in order to help me do my job, I get advice from specialists. And when you get advice from intelligence officers, counter-terrorism policing, security officials in the Home Office, and lawyers and legal advisors, and they recommend a course of action that will help protect the British public, I think everyone would expect a responsible Home Secretary to listen to them.
And was that advice unanimous? I mean, was there, because often when you're in government, you've got a series of lawyers and other people. Sometimes the advice is conflicting, and you as Home Secretary have to decide.
Again, I don't want to be discussing about a particular case, but when it's what I'd say is this: is that when it's a decision on something that is so important, and I class a decision where you take away someone's British citizenship as as a very important decision that cannot and must not be taken lightly. You would only act as Home Secretary if you had very, very clear advice.
Jeff, a quick response from you.
Look, I understand the Home Secretary has to take important and hard decisions, but the idea that denying the citizenship of someone who's 18, 19 or 20 is somehow going to a compelling reason why, it doesn't seem to ring particularly true. It doesn't seem particularly compelling. They're not Osama bin Laden or anyone like that.
Well, can I say, Jeff? I mean, Jeff, imagine that there's X, and you've been given advice that you should keep them out of the country because they're a dangerous terrorists. And let's say the Home Secretary says, you know what, I'm going to ignore that advice and let them come. And let's say they come to the UK and they blow up a sports stadium and kill 30 British citizens. What would you be saying then?
Jeff?
Well, there are plenty more. I'm sure the government has some kind of ability to put people in terrorism and terrorists in prison or punish them somehow.
Well, Jeff, you got to put someone in prison, you need evidence. Where are you going to get evidence from if this individual X is been practicing their terrorism abroad, especially in a ungoverned space?
With respect, Home Secretary, I think that's something that the government needs to answer and assess, and not just simply leave British citizens.
Look, Jeff, I think I understand what you're saying, but I hope you can reflect that the responsibility on a Home Secretary to protect the British public is a very serious one. It's not always very easy, but it does involve some difficult decisions, and you don't want a Home Secretary that shies away from making those decisions.
Jeff, final word from you.
Like I said, I understand that the Home Secretary has to make very difficult decisions, but I think it's more incumbent on the Home Secretary to justify these rather than the Home Secretary questioning a member of the public who's trying to hold them to account.
OK, Jeff, thanks very much indeed. Well, that brings us to the end of the hour. If you've missed any of my interviews with the Tory leadership candidates, you can catch up with them on the Cross Question podcast or indeed on the LBC YouTube channel. I'll be back. When will I be back? It's Thursday. I'll be back on Monday from 7. Dominic Raab will be joining us on Monday at 9. And also we have Michael Gove and Jeremy Hunt coming in on Wednesday as well. It's Darren Adam at 1, but next, Tom Swart.
Ian, thank you very much indeed. Welcome to the show. Tonight at 10, the next Prime Minister will be a man. But what kind of man?
Boris, are you going to lock the doors of Parliament? And if so, tell people, because we want to know what kind of leader or Prime Minister we're voting for.
Boris Johnson is the runaway leader to be Prime Minister.